Oh, I don't know if they remember.
Is she on the line?
They could turn
Yes,
that
I'm
air
on the
down.
line.
Very good. Hi there, Mary.
Hi.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
Hi, guys. Good to hear your voices.
We miss you.
Great to hear
I miss
yours.
you too. Thank you.
We wish you were here with us.
I will be very soon. I promise.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Good evening. This is the School Board of Lee County Board Workshop. The time is
5:46.
5:46. Dr. Graham.
We have two things on the agenda. The first is to talk through two new job descriptions that I'm proposing for the career and tech education, adult and career education. And Dr. Pruitt and Todd Everly will be making a presentation. We're talking about the two positions, the one that would replace the, and it's the description, not the title that's different, that would replace the director of adult and career education, and then the other would be a new position that we're calling a senior director, which would take over the post-secondary portion of career and tech ed. And the director position that we've always had, the job description has changed to handle just K-12 career and tech ed. And they're going to explain the rationale for why we've made this division, and you're including the cost, I believe. That would be different. Okay. So Dr. Pruitt and Mr. Everly, who's been our interim director for several months now.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, Dr. Graham, Mr. Martin. Mr. Everly is going to begin with kind of setting the stage for you and giving you a little bit of background information, and then I'll go into the details of the job descriptions and answer any questions that you might have.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Graham. Just briefly, as you are very familiar with what our adult and career education department does for the district and also for our community, I just want to go over some talking points to give you where we're at right now and what services we've provided so far this year. Under the technical career education, what we're responsible for is secondary and post-secondary technical education, our adult basic and general education, and our ESOL classes. Under the technical career programs, as you're familiar with, we have STEM at Work, where we have that partnership with the foundation. STEMtastic, which was a wonderful event this year. We had 120 booths and over 5,000 attendees at Harborside. It was a great place, and we got a lot of positive feedback on that. Teacher immersion and Digital Lee. Under the technical and career education, I'll give you a little bit of data. We are right now currently serving 250 CTE instructors through 6th grade through 12 plus. We have current CTE student enrollment is over 25,000. Current post-secondary student enrollment is over 2,000. CAPE Academy student enrollment is over 17,000. Industry certifications earned are over 3,400. And we have 42 CAPE Academies and 387 career-themed courses. Under the adult education data, I just wanted to give you some, to explain to you where we stand from the beginning of the school year to now. We have about 4,500 adult general education students in our ESOL and our GED prep programs, over 1,000 GED testers, 421 co-enrolled, and 204 FCAT testers, and 446 lifelong learning students. I wanted just to briefly tell you that the funding that we received through our adult education and what we got this year, you'll see that we have over $11.8 million that is funded through either WITIS, Perkins grants, or federal literacy programs and funding, and how that's broke up. We only use $34,000 out of the general fund to make our operation whole through our department. Some of that funding goes back, which is about $3.7 million, and that's for our CAPE funding for our schools and our industry and certification attainment for our teachers that are eligible for that. 20% of that money we do keep inside with the department, and we use that for a technical support personnel and the software that goes back out to the schools to purchase those items. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Pruitt to talk about the job descriptions. Thank you.
So initially, when Sue Rashawn retired, the job was advertised in July, and at that time there was the process was followed and there was a candidate selected, and we thought that was success and we would move forward. However, that didn't happen and that individual withdrew, and so we had to go back to the drawing board and re-advertise the position in November. And at that time, the finalists and the individual that we selected in terms of the name to move forward really wasn't going to handle all the aspects of the job. So at that time, the Compensation Recruitment Department went out and conducted a kind of a job analysis study to determine what are the other counties doing in Florida and how are they dividing out those job descriptions. And after we did that, that is how we came up with the proposal that we're bringing to you today in terms of taking the good news is it's not adding any head count. What it is doing is changing the job descriptions, and the cost of that would be $7,900, of which would not come out of district funds. It would be covered, as Mr. Everly talked about, it would come out of the workforce development monies. So again, not any addition to total count, but just a redistribution of the responsibilities. And so that was, again, based on the study that was done by Compensation Recruitment, looking at how the services are delivered in other counties. And so what we're proposing is to take one director position, and that would be the person whoever it might be that oversees the Fort Myers Technical Institute, and they would become a senior director, and they would not only run the Fort Myers Center, but they would also be responsible for the other areas as well. And that would allow us a consolidation of all those administrative functions, and then again, put that control all under one individual. Then the second change would be a change in what used to be Sue Rashan's position, still calling it no change there, but just changing the job responsibilities. It actually aligns more closely with the strategic plan and the district initiatives and what we're trying to do out there to kind of bring us into the modern age in a look at the job study analysis. Rather than having a generic job description, it really allows us to focus in on what we're trying to accomplish with that job description, and gives us really that focus on the K through 12 career and technical and the adult education and what we're trying to do in the community and with the foundation. So this would be the proposed, the way it would be structured, having what currently is Todd in the interim director, that would move to the Director of Adult and Career Education, and then as you see to the left, the TBA on the Senior Director would oversee those schools there. So again, our proposal is based on what's going on in the industry and what is going on across the state in terms of serving these needs. Are there any specific questions that we can answer at this time?
Mrs. Dozier.
I have one.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. On the senior director, then that person would be replacing Sue Rashan.
No, the Senior Director would oversee
All
part of what Sue did, which was overseeing the technical centers. But in this case, the Senior Director would not only run the Fort Myers Institute of Technology, but would also oversee the leadership responsibility in terms of supervision of the other people running the schools.
CCIT, and the Public Service Academy.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Dozier.
Okay, I understood you to say that there was no increase in the total head count. And I can see that because what you're doing is you are changing, I guess, Sue Rashan, the position that she had, and for lack of anything better to call it, I'm going to call it her position, which would now be the Senior Director position, is that correct?
No, the Director of Adult and Career Education would be the old Sue Rashan position, and then we would just shift to
I'm
this.
looking at this
The
chart.
one that says Todd Everly at the top, that's Sue's old
Okay,
position.
so that would then become Sue's old position right there, is
And-
what you're saying?
and-
The one that's in pink, right in the center? Okay.
Yes.
And I'm struggling here, and let me explain why I'm struggling. In the business world, when you are making a change, you look at things from a whole. You don't look at things in a piece. You don't look at just part of something, but you look at the whole organization. And what we are doing here is we are looking at just a portion of the organization. And I know that, and I'm trying to be very careful the way I say this. I know when we first initially approved the organizational structure for the superintendent, I asked specific questions, and those questions were, are there any other positions that you need? Are you going to be able to do the job using this structure the way it is? This is exactly what you need. We're not going to make any changes, blah, 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 blah. Well, all of a sudden, down the road, that happened in June, down the road in October, all of a sudden, we had 2 new job descriptions that we were supposed to approve, and then those got pulled. And my question is, talking about those 2 coordinator positions that have created some controversy, where do they come into being here? Do they exist? Are they, were they needed at the time, or why were they brought forward? Where are they now?
They are not on this org chart at this time. This is the adult and career education portion of the organization, and they will come back in all likelihood when and if we bring a new org chart in the summer, during the budget, not in the summer, during the budget process. This has occurred asking to split the position that belonged to Sue Rashan because we went with that position, we advertised nationally, we had someone that appeared to be able to do the job. He declined. He accepted the job and then declined the position, and then talked about maybe he would come at a later time, so we waited. We waited until the start of the school year, and he, shortly after Sue left, he said, no, it just wasn't the right time. And so then we re-advertised nationally and got very few candidates, but we also got few candidates that could really do both parts of the position. There's a post-secondary piece to this, and then there's a K-12 piece. And people tend to have expertise in one or the other. So with that, and a name was brought to me, and I was reluctant to accept it, so I said I didn't think it was a good idea, and perhaps we should go back and rethink, because we were getting people that couldn't do the whole thing. And that's when the job study was done, and we looked at what other districts are doing, and most districts have separated the K-12 and the post-secondary. And so that's what's being proposed here, is that the director of adult and career education would handle the K-12 part of this, which is growing with the state expectations of certifications for our high schoolers and for our graduates, actually, and then take the post-secondary portion, which really is about our our institutes of technology and our community school and the public service academy, and give those responsibilities, which, truth be known, I think that that Todd and Bill and those gentlemen have been doing some of this all along anyway. As the K-12 grew, they were assisting. And so we've taken that portion of the original job description and said the person who is the director of FMIT will have those added responsibilities, and to compensate, it would be just over $7,000, I believe. And so that's why we've split it, in an effort to try and find someone who can handle the K-12 portion. The coordinators came in along the way because we were going through this job study, but the work still needs to be getting done. And Todd, as the interim, was showing us that there are things that aren't going to be able to get done if we don't get a K-12 person in here fairly soon. And so the coordinators were intended to fill that gap. And then when it became clear that the coordinators, it was going to be difficult for you all to approve them and feel good about that approval, I pulled them. And as all that was happening, then the HR had finished its job study, and we designed these job descriptions in an effort to try and get on with replacing Sue Rashan. And I just want to be sure you understand, we didn't wait until she left to start looking. We started this process last summer because the intention was, we had actually budgeted that there would be an overlap of a month that Sue would be able to work with that person. And through a number of reasons, the person decided not to come. And so began this process that we've gone through. So the coordinators, if indeed, and the other reason the coordinators didn't come on originally is we wanted to let the new director, forgot this piece, we wanted to let the new director, whoever he or she was, get to choose his or her own team and look at the design and see, is this what you believe you need to get the work done in our district? And when that person, after 2 tries and the person still wasn't hired, then I thought, well, we need to come with the coordinators so we can at least get the work done. But again, I pulled that because it was clear that there was some, I don't even know what the word is, discomfort, and I did say, when you all asked me, that I believe the org chart was what we needed. This is a large organization, it's a fluid organization, and this need came about because we were unable to fill that director position. So that's where we are right now.
This is Mary. Is there an anticipation then that by having the post-secondary piece split from the K-12 adult and career ed, we'll get better qualified applicants on the next go-around? And are we planning to advertise?
As soon as you all agree and we can bring these job descriptions forward for you all to approve, then we will advertise the next day. We do believe it will be easier is not the word I want to use, but that we are more likely to get a candidate who has expertise in the K-12, because those who have that expertise, we have those people right in our district, those who have the expertise with the career and tech education for K-12 do not necessarily have the post-secondary component, or they have the post-secondary component and don't have the K-12. So what we'll be advertising as for the director is the new job description that we're proposing to you that focuses on the K-12 career and tech ed.
Okay, I have one more question then about the post-secondary piece. The senior director will be over those four entities, and what will the people leading those 4 entities, with the exception of, I think I'm reading, Fort Myers Institute of Technology, what will they be called?
Currently, are continuing to work through our job descriptions and job titles. We would like to align that so that it actually matches a little closer and is aligned, and we're going to do that as part of our comprehensive study.
Yeah, I think that's something that definitely needs to be considered. And as a Cape Coral representative, I'm going to tell you that already I have heard in the community some concern about the fact that CCIT would not have its own director.
That is not the case.
Okay.
There's no thought to removing a director from either Institute of Technology. It's just the larger institute, which is the Fort Myers campus. That person will have the responsibility for reporting and collection of information and coordination of all of those, the community school, the 2 technology schools, and the public service academy. And essentially what we've done salary schedule-wise is taken that FMIT director, and correct me if I'm wrong, from a director 2 to a director 1. That's where the change in compensation comes from. Because
Okay.
there would be additional responsibility. There is no thought to reducing the role as far as what those people are doing at the institutes in the Public Service Academy right now. It's simply adding responsibility to the FMIT person, and it's in the area of reporting and gathering information. And I see Todd and Angela nodding, so.
Okay. Is there some available information right now on the difference in the enrollment between FMIT and CCIT and the capacity for enrollment?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can tell you that it's quite significant. Fort Myers Institute of Technology, I would say, is almost double the capacity of what Cape Coral Institute of Technology does and what they bring in. I would compare Cape Coral Institute of Technology to my current academy, Southwest Florida. Actually, we bring in a little bit more, so they're more comparable into students and the resources and size and the programs that we offer, Ms. Fisher. So, but Fort Myers Institute of Technology is quite more large than the other technical centers that we have, and the monies that they produce at the end is quite significantly different.
Right, right, and I'm aware of that, and I guess what I'm really asking then, does CCIT have the capacity for increased enrollment, or is it at its present level due to the size of the facility?
I'm sorry, can't answer that. I didn't get that information.
Okay.
For that, I could provide it later, and we can get with the
Thank you.
director.
Well, we will get you all of that, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
Jeannie? Mrs. Dozier?
Mr. Torber's sorry, Sandra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just confused a lot. Looking at the graph, there's all the colors based upon the key in the lower left. So you're telling me all these positions on this proposed organizational chart, none of them are coming out of our operational budget?
There are percentages that are, but yes, $34,000 only is out of general fund. The rest of these positions that are funded through federal and state grants, and we have not filled some of those because we were waiting for the new director to come in and see how they would align. But yes, those are grant-funded positions, sir.
So Charles Daly at Dunbar Community School is a grant?
I do not know how his is, because that's not under, that's under the other side.
Chart. That's my question. It's on the chart. This chart is confusing in the sense that, number one, the TBA senior director, who does that report to? Where is that in the scheme of things? It's sitting out there floating into nowhere.
I think it would be helpful if we went to the job descriptions themselves, and what Todd is saying about funding, and if you want a breakdown, we can give it to you. The people on that chart represent 34.
Well, excuse me,
what's
and I
the
don't mean to
question?
interrupt you, Dr. Graham, but I still had the floor. My point is, this doesn't, I don't want to do a job description because a job that to me is right now not even on, it's not on our organizational chart, it's not approved, it's not, you need to give us an organizational chart, and I'd like to have it from the superintendent all the way down to the coordinator level, and I'd like to know what line code out of our budget these people correspond to, and what's their job code. I see Charles Daly done, if he's a principal, I need it as a principal, and I need to know what line item, what line code are we billing his classification to, because this looks like we've got a lot of people. How much is it operation? How much are we exploding our operation? It looks like we're taking Rashawn's position, we're adding a higher paid position, and then we're adding still another director. So we're not splitting it up. You're going to have a director the way it looks. Todd's interim director position is going to get changed to a director of K-12. Well, that's a director. That's exactly what Sue Rashawn is. So we're not splitting anything. We're replacing that. Now we've created a whole new person of an executive director, which is now a senior director. It's going to be even more money. That's a new position being created. So we're not splitting anything.
The senior director is going to be the person, for purposes of this graph, this chart. The senior director is the same as the Fort Myers Institute of Technology director. It's not another position.
The stipend.
It is, so just because their name's on here, Bill McCormick, for purposes of conversation, is the senior director.
Okay.
Okay? And the only position, then the director, where it says Todd Everly, that was Sue's position. Everything else on here has been here. Now, as far as the dollars, where the funding comes from, we can certainly give that to you.
Okay, so let me follow you. So, okay, then maybe I understand. So the position right now where it shows that Bill McCormick's position, that box, there's a TBA, there's the schools, there's 4 boxes. The new organization, the 3 boxes will remain. Todd and Mike and Charles' boxes will stay.
Correct.
Bill McCormick's will disappear, but it will now go above into that senior director position.
Correct.
Okay. Better understood. Okay.
Sorry for
I'm
the
with you.
confusion.
Mrs. Dozier.
And my question, pigtails on the bottom of that one. We have Mr. McCormick at the Fort Myers Institute of Technology, Todd Everly at the Service Academy, blah, blah, blah. And I have worked with the principals / directors of these technology institutes, and I have heard from them that their day is filled with the current job expectations that they have. So again, I think this is putting a Band-Aid on a head wound. I'm not sure we're going to get what we need to get, because Mr. McCormick has all of the position or all of the duties that he currently has. What we're going to do is we are going to add additional duties to him, and I'm not sure that that's the way to get the best, I'm just not sure that that's the way to get the best performance of all the duties. I think I understand why you're trying to do it, but I can't see that as a plus. Instead, I see it as something's going to fall through the cracks. Something is going to get left out. Something's going to get left undone. And I know currently, he has his hands full. So are we going to put another arm on there to give him another hand, or what mechanics or mechanisms are being put in place that is going to allow him to have extra time to do this position? And I understand that we have coordinators that we've had coordinators at times, and I'm going to give an example. I don't see her out there in the audience, but Jean Ann Faleris was the art coordinator for a while, and I will tell you that while I think that can work with some people, I'm not sure that it can work with all people. And I also believe that there is a situation when you have that things do get undone. In fact, Jean Ann and I had this conversation when that was her position. And I will tell you, I heard from a lot of the art teachers, a lot of the art and music teachers, a lot of the things that they felt needed to be done or had been done. When that was switched over, it got dropped, fell through the cracks, however you want to say. The ball got dropped, it fell through the cracks or whatever. And my concern is, again, I see us piecemealing something. I don't see us looking at the big picture. And I think strategically, in a quality organization, you look at the big picture and you say, okay, how can we look at this organization, and I know in the past we've looked at entire departments and we've collapsed this department. That doesn't mean, everybody out there that's listening, don't start quaking and think that you're going to lose your job, because that's not it. Instead, what you're doing is sometimes you realign things. You realize that you've got all these positions here, here, and here, and they are doing double duty and everybody's stepping on everybody's feet and toes and everything else. And I do think a lot of that is going on right now. So I'm really struggling with this. I'm struggling to the point that I just don't. Staff, I'm sorry, you haven't convinced me that this is the best way to go. I mean, I appreciate all your efforts. I appreciate everything that you've brought forward, but I'm just not sure that we're going to get the best bang for our buck, so to speak.
I'd just like to give a little background. This division was generated by staff who believes it can be done. And I would like to ask the board's indulgence to at least look at the job descriptions, if you haven't already, so you can see how the duties have been divided. But I will tell you that folks have been involved, people who are doing the work have been involved in this conversation, and they believe it is a logical division of the duties. And the fact is that some of the work that's in the senior director job description has been done by them all along. because as K-12 grew and the responsibilities grew, other people had to take on some of the post-secondary because Sue was very busy helping K-12 grow. So it's, now what we're doing is actually putting the descriptions in of the people who are doing the work. Todd, did you want to say something?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to answer two questions. Mr. Toiber, I did get that back. It's 100% WITIS. All those positions that are on that side, that was always there under the current organizational serve. So all those, my position, all that is 100% WITIS. No.
I saw the .0. I saw that where you said 34,000. I saw that allocation after you said that.
Okay.
I found that.
And all those are, and I think the philosophy, and when we looked at this as a team, is to coordinate the efforts between really the Cape Coral Institute of Technology and Fort Myers Institute, since they offer and deliver majority of the same type of programs, bring them in line together to make sure that the administrative in the accreditation processes are being done together. You know, they're being run by two, and that you still always have directors there, but a senior director who is currently still doing that right now. We have taken a lot of those K-12 responsibilities, and even I have at the academy with the firefighter program 1. We're doing also a law enforcement program now. We're trying to soften that load because how fast it's exploding. But I just wanted to answer that question back to you, sir, that it is 100% WITIS, and then maybe some of the coordination there to Mrs. Dozier. It would just maybe bring everything under one person as a chain of command type to make sure we're all on the same page. That was.
I think part of the problem is what we had, if I get the idea of what was the original dream, was to have someone who would oversee all of that. But when you go out and you look at it, for people who have that post-secondary experience, they're not going to want to come for the money we can pay them. So it's a matter of figuring out how we're going to do what we can with the money that we've got. Question I want to ask Todd and Angela, were staff people, were Bill and Todd, you, Mike, and Charles, were all of you involved in the conversation about how this would work?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And they felt comfortable with it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so let's say that this year we're having Bill McCormick, who's going to take that stipend and do it, and he says, I'm fine with this. What if it trades off and next year, let's say Mike says, I would like to do that, or Bill leaves. And now and then we would approach Mike to do that. Are other people willing to take that on?
If Bill were to leave, we would advertise the position.
All right.
And the job description would explain
the
what's
whole
expected
piece.
in the job.
Thank you.
Okay. My question is, this area is the area where we have significant partnerships. Correct. Foundation running programs, corporate partnerships, we have advisory committees. Were any of those people or organizations involved when the org chart was considered and when the descriptions were created?
Marshall was involved.
But anybody else? We have a business advisory committee, I believe, at FMIT. You have a small business advisory committee. Have we talked to people in the community who are interfacing with who will be interfacing with these entities and ask them, you know, what are you getting today? What do you need? And does this align with where the community sees us going in terms of adult and career ed and career and tech ed?
None of this, to answer your question, Marshall Bauer represented that element of the community. I mean, that's the answer to that.
Okay.
And none of the services are going to change. None of those partnerships are going to change. Both Mr. Schiffer and Mr. McCormick are aware of this proposal, and they are the ones that have those partnerships. So in the K-12 piece, because the foundation is so involved, we did have Mr. Bauer involved, and he is very clear that we would do better to have someone dedicated to K-12. We are trying to be creative in how we approach this, because I've heard several times we need to be careful about adding administrative positions, and the expertise between post-secondary and K-12 is different, and the people that are applying, in most cases, have one or the other, and that's the challenge. And I'm unsure, I'm unsure that the community is as concerned about the inner working of our internal administrative setup as they are getting the services that they want. And I think this can only, personally, I believe this structure would enhance what's already happening.
My concern continues to be that this is something that was primarily developed internally as an internal perception of what the need is, as opposed to a more universal perception of what the need is, and that concerns me.
Okay, and I guess I'm confused because nothing, the businesses aren't going to get anything different. If anything, they're going to get more, because there's going to be somebody in the post-secondary world that's going to be devoted and focused on post-secondary, and then there's going to be someone K-12 devoted and focused on K-12, rather than one person trying to split between the two.
I have no problem with the split.
Okay.
So,
May I piggyback on Mrs. Morgan's statements about that? I had written some notes down as I reviewed everything before, and one of the words that I had put down here were the partnerships with a question mark, because in my community here in Cape Coral, I have had a lot of feedback from the business community about the fact that they feel that there are needs that could be better met by CCIT with some changes. I'm just not sure if the changes that are being proposed here are the ones that will satisfy that need. And I really think that, a needs assessment should be part of this whole thing, because there are so many people externally impacted.
And I believe when we get someone new on board that would be one of the first things they do. We talked about that they would need to review the program, how it was set up and how it was done, and it was our intention, whoever we replaced Mr. Sean with, that would be the first thing they do, is have the very kinds of conversations you're asking for. What I'm hearing is you think we should have them on the front end. Okay.
Yes, I think that at least a basic needs assessment would have been prudent on the front end.
Mrs. Dozier.
And I love to use examples. I'm going to use an example of a situation that we had that existed here in Lee County several years ago. We had a situation where we had and I'm sure that Mr. Snell can remember this very well. We had a situation where here's the business community and the construction industry, and here's the Lee County School District, and it was like this all the time. And they constantly were saying, you make all these decisions, you don't bring us in, we don't know what's going on, it takes a lot of time for us to do an RFP, it takes a lot of time with our companies and blah, 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 And so all of a sudden we said, okay, what we need to do, what would best suit your needs? We talked to several people and we said, okay, the best thing for us to do is to bring all these entities together and basically just in one meeting say, okay, this is what our expectation is, what is your expectation, and have a dialogue all together. And we didn't like everything we heard. They didn't like everything they heard. However, at the end of the day, they had a much greater respect for the Lee County School District, because now they don't feel like we're trying to hide things or we're trying to do things to where they're not completely in the loop of what's going on. The same thing with us. We knew exactly, we had a better understanding for some of the contractors and what they were going through, and we could see what they were blasting us about, so to speak, because, we didn't understand that. We got that. And so in this industry, and this is an extremely important industry to this community because we have heard this over and over and over again. And for us to make decisions like this in isolation, and I think that is the way we've done this, is in isolation, I think we're shooting ourselves not in one foot but both feet, because we have a golden opportunity to try to interface with these people. They want to do this. They want to help us, and yet we are not taking advantage of the offerings that they are presenting to us. And consequently, we put something out there not knowing whether it's going to and I don't want to say pass or fail, not knowing whether it's going to succeed or whether it's going to just, there's nothing that convinces me that 6 months from now, 9 months from now, okay, well, this it sounded real good when we did it, but it's not working, so we need to go back to the drawing board and we need to do something else. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from right now, and I'm still struggling to try to support this, and yet I know that you had Mr. Everly call me. He and I had a conversation around those last two positions. Again, that is evidence that we're piecemealing things, that we are putting things in place and we're not looking at the big picture. And in a quality organization, you look at the big picture as a whole and not just a part of the organization. Am I wrong in that, Mr. Toiber?
And I saw Mrs. La Riviere's before you.
Okay. It would seem to me that before those conversations can happen with all the different business entities and the people that we do interface with, that we do work with, that there needs to be someone who would be the point person to bring those people together.
And that would be our superintendent of administration. That would be his position.
Possibly.
Am I wrong there?
Well, what I was thinking is it would be the Bill McCormick, because he knows this stuff. They understand this, they get it. I don't know that all of our in my mind, this is where I was thinking. And I know people will disagree, but we're also dealing with the reality of we need to definitely take care of the K-12, and we definitely right now don't have anything for post-secondary. And if we're going to, how urgent is the post-secondary? That's my number one question. How urgent is it that we have somebody who would be the buck stops here person? And then the second point is, well, sometimes we do something temporarily so we can get the ball rolling, because yes, we probably do need to make some changes with what happens at CCIT. Yes, we do need to make some adjustments along the way. We do need to see some tweaking, but we need somebody to help oversee that. I don't see this position as a long-term permanent position. Ideally, we will have somebody that will be the person that will oversee it in its whole. But we've got to do something so that the pieces that are the important pieces, especially all of the parts that they have to do to make sure they're in line with those grants, to make sure they've got all those pieces. We need to have somebody to help pull those pieces together from all of our institutes and from Dunbar Community School to help make sure that that part is flowing right.
Are you finished?
I'm finished.
Oh, okay. Mr. Toiber.
I don't know where Ms. Levies is thinking about as far as it's not going to be two positions. I don't think there's any intent, and maybe Dr. Graham can correct me, but she's not planning to putting these both together. These are two positions, and again, my understanding, and again, I might be mistaken, but there's a K-12 and there's a post-secondary, but both of these are supposed to be the adult and career education directors and senior director, if I'm not mistaken. My problem is, and I go back to what Ms. Dozier said, and we've had this discussion repeatedly, Dr. Graham, this is where we're going from. This is the VOTEC world. This is going to the liaison to business. These are the kids, both whether it's the K-12 portion or it's the post-secondary. It's going into the business world, and it's going into the technical business world and the people that have that technical expertise. And my understanding was we're not going to looking at these job descriptions, and I don't even understand without decoding what some of this stuff even is with certifications in adult administration. I don't even know, can you get a certification in local vocation as a local vocational director? Is that a state certification, or what is that? So, and I'll let you answer that question in a second, but I guess my question is, the business world is looking for a director that gets it, that's been on that side of the fence. None of this job description, it still shows we're still getting people out of education. We're not with nobody that's been in the real world and that's actually done that job. Everybody, all our directors that are doing the police, the fire, they've been there, done that. They know what it takes to get there, and then they've got that extra experience to do the other side, so they bridge that gap. And they've come over to the educational side to pull people over into that business side, and I think that's what the business people are looking for. In the business world, they speak a different language, because in the educational world they speak a different language. There's not one's right or one's better or one's worse. They're just different, and you have to bridge that gap. One of the biggest problems you have with software developers is they got great programmers, but you don't understand what the end product, what the guy in front of the interfaces really wants to see. So there's a disconnect, and it's a huge disconnect. We've got some very fortunate, very good people in our system. They go from their programming backwards to the code. They're looking at, this is what the person sees. What do you want to see? Which button do you want to push? And then they just make the magic happen behind. That's the same thing with this VOTEC person. This director's got to see they understand what it's going to be a successful fireman, what's a successful policeman, what's going to be a successful machinist or a draftsman or whatever those type of technicians. The aviation we talked about, the aviation program. It's got to be somebody that understands. To build an aviation program, they have to understand what does the aviation market need, because they have to have been there. And it doesn't have to be specifically in aviation, because they're all different shades of the same cat, but it's somebody who's been in that industry at different levels of that management style and been in that to do that. I don't see us with these two descriptions getting there. See it. Okay.
That's really what we're supposed to be talking about, the job descriptions, because I'm asking you to look at them, and we got over onto the chart. The job descriptions are what we want to talk about. We believe this is what we need in these jobs. If you all think there needs to be something else, and I will tell you that the person has to have the ability to communicate well with the business community. If they have just a business background, then we're going to have to really support them with education people, and then we will come back with coordinators and other positions, because they're going to need that. But that's really what I need to hear from you all, is the job descriptions. And what we were trying to focus on is that one person will deal with post-secondary. They are different. The K-12 career and tech ed is a different animal than the post-secondary, and that's where we've hit a wall, because very few people, we haven't found one that has both, that is willing to share that expertise with our district. So if you have issues with the job description, that's really what we're after today.
Well, first off, I think I don't have I agree with the K-12 post-secondary. I don't have a problem with it being split up and doing it, and I definitely agree that you're trying to get somebody, it's, the Microsoft Office suite, you're trying to get everybody to do it. I understand that. I don't have a problem with that portion. But I go back to what Ms. Morgan said and what Ms. Dozier said. Before you come to us, you ought to go to our business community and ask them the question, what type of person do you need? They should have that input, because they're the ones that are going to get the end product. They're the customer on that business side to one degree, and those are the type of people that should go to first and say, what are you guys looking for? Like, and went back to Ms. Dozier said, and what deliverables, if we want to get more in touch to the business community, and we want to get more career things online, what are we going to, what is that person going to need? What kind of visionary is that person going to be? And then tailor that job description to have that person to see kind of what the end goal is. I mean, we can go through it today ourselves, but I'd like them to really start with people, because again, we're not that group either. So I think that's what Ms. Dozier and Ms. Morgan was trying to say, and at least that's what I got, and that's where I'm at. So.
Ms. LaRiviere.
And excuse me, when I was addressing and speaking from the part that had to do with the needs assessment, when I was listening to Ms. Fisher and I was listening to Ms. Dozier, I was listening to and hearing services that we need to provide people. I was not asking them about the job description.
Gotcha.
I wholeheartedly agree that they need to be involved with the job description piece. Our issue will be, if they give us their dream, we won't be able to pay for what they want. We're going to have some compromise. Because anyone who has been in the corporate level that has the expertise to oversee all of the other pieces, they're going to want a six-digit figure. And we're not going to be able to provide that for them. And so what we have to do is, there does need to be that conversation with the people that these future employees are going to be working with. Yes, we do need to have that conversation about what they would like to see as a job description for that person. But we also have to keep it into the reality of, yes, we want somebody that's totally out of the field, but forgive me if I'm wrong, I do believe that Bill and Mike have worked in the business world, correct? I know that they have. They've had that expertise. I know that Mike has. And so we do have some business, but you're not going to find somebody who has business world in all of the areas that we're taking care of. And so what we just need to do is have that conversation with our people in the community beyond Marshall to change this to adjust this job description. My question is, I can live with this job description for now on a temporary basis so that we can go ahead and get the job done. Because I don't know if Todd Everly wants to keep doing his job as the interim director along with his other work. But we have to come up with something so that we can work with for now, but we also have to have a plan for how we're going to have the business community involved in all of the aspect for post-secondary.
Ms. LaRiviere made me think of a question. When you talk to other districts, are these job descriptions, do they come from what other districts do? And how about salaries?
It's in line with what is done across the state. That was part of the job analysis and the salary study. Having it at the Director 1 level it isn't the best, but it's the best we can do given the circumstances of the situation.
Thank you.
But the job description is aligned.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Fisher, do you have any more questions?
Well, I'm just looking at the qualification. Qualification number 2 is, and it's the same on both, minimum of 3 years experience in administrative or supervisory positions. So that could cover business experience outside of education, and a minimum of 5 years related professional experience in career, technical, or adult education. So that seems to be broad enough to incorporate some, business experience, some out there business experience. I was coming from the point of view that we have needs out there in the business community now that the business community would like for our technical institutes to be able to prepare the people to fill the jobs that they have almost now. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do an example like someone did before. I understand that there's a big need for welders, and welders make pretty good money. But I was told that we couldn't increase our welding program, and I think that one's at FMIT, because we didn't have the space or the money for the materials. So, and that's out there in the business community. That's not me speaking. So, that's the kind of thing that concerns me, and we need somebody who, yes, is going to have that relationship. And Mr. McCormick himself will tell you that he has people who work for him who nurture those business relationships and get those people that are graduating from their place in jobs almost immediately. Mm-hmm. They have a high placement rate. So I think we want to see, yes, we need a job description, and these look to me like they're global enough and broad enough to incorporate at least a little of what we're looking for. So taking it from there, I think we do need to move forward and make sure that we have, qualified people in the right seats, and that we will be able to continue to improve our programs designed to qualify people for the jobs that are popping up out there right now, which are different than they were 5 or 10 years ago. I think that's all I have.
Board members, any other comments? So we need to give the superintendent direction on this. Can I have comments from the board, please, about whether or not you support the job descriptions and the organization chart going forward?
And can we spend some time where we're actually going through, like, the first, the job descriptions?
Sure.
And I'm just looking at the first one that comes in the agenda for the Director for Adult and Career Ed.
May I insert one other thing as you do this? If your concern is the business community having input into who gets this position, is that it, or what the position, how the position is described? Because if there's concern that you want them to, because I'm hearing you want their input on what kind of person, what this role should have, we can certainly broaden who's part of the process to select that person. We had business people before, but we can certainly broaden that. That's another option, but I am concerned, well, not, you all made it clear some time ago that you needed to be briefed on job descriptions and to be able to give your input, so that's why they're here. Rather than send them to you through memo, that's why we've asked to have this conversation.
Is there anything discussion or any part that you, like, when I look at I have no problem with the Director for Adult and Career Ed. For that one piece, okay. And that's where I need discussion. Let's see.
I mean, to me, and again, it just seems like we create these nebulous job descriptions that you can put just about anybody in that job. You can take, for example, the Director of Adult Education. You can have an educator, and again, I'm not saying that this person can't do the job. I'm just saying you can make. If a job qualification is supposed to be a limiting criteria, if we want to have somebody that has experience in a technical field, then we got to have a technical field. You could actually you go get a master's degree in education, never been right from high school to college and education, so you've never had a technical class at all. You go work at Ida Baker, which is a technical school. You teach some of our technical classes or in our technical curriculum, but not particularly an engineering class or a medical class. So you're not teaching that. You would get your 3 years of special experience in a supervisory, or 3 years of special experience in administrative or AP, if you were an AP, at Ida Baker, and you knowledge and blah, blah, blah. The rest of it's all educational stuff. That's what we're having. We're getting a lot of people. We need to get to raise our bar. We need to start having our high school math teachers not a degree in education, but a degree in math. We need to have them with a minor in education because they need to know how to, I mean, there's a skill set. They have to know be an educator, but they have to also have that basic raw skill. We're expecting our kids to know high-level physics, high-level math. We're asking them to learn technical trades. You know, you have to know how to turn metal if you're going to try to talk to people about what it's going to be a machinist, or at least to have that concept. You have to have somebody that has, you know, and it doesn't matter. You know, Ms. Rivera says we don't have to have, you know, someone doesn't have experience in all our professional fields. It doesn't matter. When you've done one, you've done. They're all. It's the same thing. It's just done it. But you know, when you're an educator, you don't. It doesn't matter if you're an educator. You can teach a 3rd grade or a 5th grade class because it's a different. You know, it's a whole different skill set. There are different kids and so on. But you can adapt because an educator, you can have that ability to. So it's not that much of a change. Well, it's the same thing in the business world. You can run, you know, you can run a nuclear plant, and then you can run a silicone plant. It's because it's just they're different technologies, but that basic experience of having that technical expertise transcends all those different fields. And so I don't see technical expertise, a requirement for technical expertise in a technical director's position. And if this board doesn't feel that that's where we need to go, but you know, I want to start raising that, you know, based upon where our standards are going, I want to start saying if we're going to have our high schools, our APs and our APs and ACE and Cambridge, all those type of programs, our English teachers should be lit majors. I mean, they should have that experience, that one step above all, you know, me, you know, I mean, I shouldn't be teaching English Lit. I'm not an English Lit major. I don't have those nuances and those extra things that are going to take you over the top. We need to, every one that we're looking for from this point forward and challenging the people that are currently in our current fields, you need to be the best there is. You have to know your subject matter better than everybody else because you're the one teaching it. So you got to have a grasp of that substantive portion in addition to the educational, because again, if we're talking about treating our professionals as professionals, and we want to raise their salaries and so on, we want to have that argument to say nobody can do it but these people. They are the cream of the crop. And so now you start commanding the ability to command those type of salaries, to command that type of respect. We get those type of results. We got to start somewhere. And the discussion that we had was we're probably going to have to pay a little bit more. Ms. La Riviere said it's going to be 6-figure. I'd like to know, and you probably know off the top of your head, but I think Mr. McCorm, all of our directors are in the 6 figures. Mm-hmm. So it's a 6-figure job. Mm-hmm. So don't kid ourselves. It's a 100,000 plus job. It should be a little bit tougher to get it than just general criteria that you can fit 25 people into that criteria and say, then we'll pick, 25 people qualify, then it all goes down to be subjectivity of the interviewing groups. We got to get beyond that subjectivity of interviewing groups and down to rubrics and objective measurements based upon criteria and performance.
You've named 2 of the qualifications. What do you want to add to those? What do you not want someone with a master's degree, or do you want them to have a master's degree in something else? How much experience do you want them to have in administration or supervisory positions, related professional experience? These are.
I'll give you an example. If I would do the qualifications, I would say a bachelor's degree in a technical field, either in some technical field, engineering, mathematics, physics, or one of the basic sciences or engineering. That's your bachelor's degree. Your master's degree can be in business or in education. That's fine, because you can, once you have that basic as your basic expertise. If you got an engineering degree as a bachelor's, you don't need to do that. Now, if somebody says, "Well, I really want to be an educator," so now they go to get their master's in education, that would be the greatest mix. Now they have that educational experience and they have that technical expertise. So that's the educational side. And then the second one has got to be 5 years, and 5 years is not a long time. 5 years in industry, or 5 years in industry or like sciences, so they could actually be if they could be in laboratories or whatever. I mean, I don't want to limit it to manufacturing, but I want to have that type of, they've been in the real world with real jobs, whether they're a scientist or they're in manufacturing or they're in research. It doesn't matter, because I don't want to limit, people that are actually in, biomedical and those type of things as well. But I really want people that have that proclivity in addition to, and and then add a third one in with some background of to be able to teach. So you need that third one is what's your ability to teach. I know I'm setting the bar high.
No, it's
It's a
okay.
six-figure
I'm
job.
listening.
You know, I mean, it is.
Ms. LaRiviere.
Just one piece, you already have in here the minimum of 5 years related professional experience in career, technical, or adult education. So what you're asking is so if I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Teuber, you would be saying a minimum of 5 years related to professional experience in career or technical field.
Yep.
And
then
you
add a
would
second.
not want adult education on there.
No, but I want the second line to be something, now we put a second sentence, you know, the number 3 would be something dealing with now you've got the technical part, now you got the third line would be something educational.
So then in addition to 2 would be then, the other minimum would be experience in adult education.
Or even educate, if they're
Education.
educators, sure.
And there is a valid point to suggest we don't have anything here with regards to a bachelor's degree, because typically when you're looking for someone for this position, you're looking for the master's degree or higher. So it would be a valid piece to see if they have a bachelor's degree in an industry of some type.
Wrote
So
it
that
down.
I can see where that would. Well, and then that would also lend towards their career. If they did have a minimum of 5 years in a career, most likely they should have had that bachelor's degree for that.
Oh, Mr.
I would like to see 2 or 3, the people that you contacted, 2 or 3 other school districts that have, I'd like to see their structure, I'd like to see a copy of their organizational structure, and I'd also like to see a copy of their job descriptions, because that would give us to see what they are, because I'll give you a good example. You can go pull the requirements for a professor at Southwest Florida Technical College for an engineering professor, for the law, or for the special safety services. Because I sit on the board for the paralegal, and so I've seen the job descriptions to be able to teach their paralegal classes. There's the paralegal classes, not law, but they're paralegals, so they're going to go into the law field. You have to have a law degree, you have to have experience in practice, you have to have experience in education. I mean, it's a huge job, and it's a $50,000 job. And I guarantee you that, the criteria, and it's as hard as it is, they still had 32 applicants. So, I mean, they're out there of that level of performance. We can get that type of bar, but we have to set it. And I would encourage us to look at, and again, because, there's similar to what Mr. Everly has, they have that type of thing at Southwest Florida College. Pull one of those job descriptions for one of those directors. Do the same thing for Southwest Florida College. Take the ones that, Dr. Pruitt already has, get those copies and see what it is. That gives us some idea. I just think we're setting the bar awfully nebulous and awfully low. And I think we're going to keep continuing to get, and we've been blessed. I mean, we've got a lot of good people in our district, but it's because, there are a lot of people that have been here over time. They've raised up to that level, but the bar keeps raising higher as well. Our people are going to have to continue to raise their bar as our requirements are getting higher, and we're expecting more. So someone that's coming in, we really need to start hiring people that are, somebody to emulate. We've got the opportunity. Let's set the bar high.
Can I just weigh in on that a little bit? I think that when we have a director of an educational facility, we want somebody with educational expertise. And having worked in education for 50 years, it is a real job. It's sometimes harder than some of the jobs out in the technical community. But I think what we're looking for here is someone who has these qualifications, and then you go down and it says demonstrated ability to interact effectively with personnel as well as business, industry, and community leaders. And I think that's key. The director is going to be the PR person. The director is going to be the person who's going to communicate with the community and find out what the needs are, and then make sure that those programs are put in place so that we can meet those needs. I mean, so, it's more than that. I mean, and we don't want to diminish the educational expertise, because we are educational facilities. We are teaching people how to do jobs. So I think we want to keep that in mind and keep that piece there. And I really, I don't look at that as setting the bar low. I mean, I think that is setting the bar high. And I definitely agree that it has to be someone who also has some experience and expertise in technical or business fields. Someone maybe who's been a CEO of another organization. So I think that the job description is broad and covers a lot and gives us a lot to consider with potential applicants, because they may not have all of it, but they may have the key pieces.
I hear what you're saying, Mary, because that other part, that's an important part that needs to be included in the rubric. However we find out, we need to look at that job goal piece where it does talk about how well are they able to work with others. How are they able to reach out to the PR?
That should be number one.
Yes, right. Because that's their main goal. That's their main duty.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not going to be teaching the classes.
Other questions, comments? Mrs. Dozier?
Well, I'm debating on whether I'm going to say what I'm thinking. Sometimes I open mouth and insert one foot and then the other goes in right behind it. We are policymakers, and I'm going to be very, very careful the way that I say this. I think that one thing is for us to give input, for us to start writing a job description is quite another. In fact, we have staff to write job descriptions, and getting input is one thing again, but us to sit here and start writing, I think that it should be pretty clear what this board wants and what the expectation is. And so staff goes back, staff puts what we've set out here together, and then they bring it back again. And they can keep going back if it's not right. If there's any unclear direction, now is the time for staff to say, I don't quite understand what you're asking for. But for us to sit here, and I think we're getting down into the minutia of bordering on something that's really not in our, it's not in our governance model. And again, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes by saying this. I'm just simply, I hear all of you, I hear your frustrations, and I think there's a reason for this frustration. I think the reason for this frustration is because all of us look at the documents that we've got, and obviously maybe the planning that needed to be done ahead of time was not done with board members. And so that's why we've sat here for an hour and 15 minutes tonight talking about this one. And frankly, I mean, if a job description is what the expectation is of the board, it comes to us, okay, we're going to support it, boom, there it goes. I mean, we would have been here 15 minutes and then we would have been gone on to the next issue, because we do have another issue behind this. But that's where I'm coming from right now.
Dr. Graham, do you have what you need?
I believe we do.
Okay.
And I'll bring it back, and I'm happy to have individual conversations with board members about them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I need 5 minutes, or
Okay.
3 minutes, or,
No, okay.
go ahead and get ready.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break?
Yeah, just, yeah.
Thank you. Is she there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Do we have a PowerPoint for that other thing?
It should be up.
Do we have a PowerPoint for that?
Do you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Okay, the other item on the agenda is to talk about the sales tax referendum. You asked staff to pull some information together, and so that's what we've done. And if indeed this is the direction the board wants to go, there are some things we'll need to know. So the goal tonight is,
Click on the plus. Okay, those are the,
Huh?
now.
Do we need Alan? I don't know if she needs Alan to, we're trying to get her on the PowerPoint.
ready? So the goal tonight is that we share information with you, and what we're going to need to know from you ultimately is if we want to do this, when, the term of the sales tax, how long it would last. That would be part of the referendum language. The project list, and staff is working on that, but we've divided, you'll see, we've divided it into categories of projects. So we're going to want to hear from you. Are we missing some categories that you think? So we don't need to list tonight exactly what would happen, but are there categories we've missed? And then the desire, whether or not you want to have an oversight committee, should the referendum pass. So those are the things we're going to need to know. And at the end, Amy and Bill are going to give you that list again. And if you say, well, we don't have enough information to give you an answer to that, then what other information do you need? But that's ultimately for us to move forward with this effort. Those are the things we need to know. And with that, I am going to turn it over, I believe, to Mr. Martin.
Board members, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the Florida law with respect to a sales tax referendum forward by a school board. The authority for placing in sales tax referendum on the ballot comes from Chapter 212, which provides that a school board may adopt a resolution imposing a 0.5% sales surtax conditioned on voter approval. Now, the statute does say that after adoption of that resolution, that the issue shall be placed on the ballot by the governing board of the county, which of course is the county commissioners, Board of County Commissioners. So after adoption of the resolution, the matter would need to go to the Board of County Commissioners for their action. The supervisor of elections has requested 120 days notice for the election. adoption of that resolution, there are certain components that would be required to be included in that resolution. And these vital components are again those subjects upon which we would need direction in order to proceed to prepare that document, move forward with the referendum. The first component being the date of the election. When is this going to go before the voters? Second being the term of the sales tax, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There is no minimum, there is no maximum in statute, so that's in the discretion of the school board. The project list. The statute says that there will be a project list attached to the resolution, which is a brief and general description of the school capital outlay projects to be funded by that sales tax. Generally, that's a list of schools with broad categories of work. You don't want it to be too specific because the use of those funds is limited by the project list that you adopt, but you do want it to be sufficiently detailed to cover the work to be accomplished and to show the benefit to schools, to which schools are going to be on the list. The fourth component is an oversight committee. This is not a component that actually is required by statute. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the sales tax referendum resolution. It could be in a separate resolution, could be established in policy. And we see those examples with other school districts that have gone through this process. In reviewing the establishment documents provided from other school districts, generally the duties of that committee would be to review the proposed expenditures of sales tax funds to ensure they're in compliance with the list, and to provide regular reports of the sales tax expenditures to the school board. The statutes do have required notices with respect to the election. There's a requirement to provide notice to the voters 5 and 3 weeks before the election. There's also a requirement post-election to provide notice to the Department of Revenue, and that has to occur within 10 days after the referendum passes and no later than the 16th of November in order for it to be effective the 1st of January the following year. The sales tax is always effective on the 1st of January. A statute provides a specific listing of what uses can be made of the sales tax funds, and that is different than the list that you see for the 1.5 capital millage. It's specific to that statute, and you see some of the uses listed there: construction, reconstruction, improvement of school facilities, land acquisition, land improvement, design and engineering costs, technology, implementation, retrofitting, hardware and software, and bond indebtedness, the servicing of bond indebtedness for any debt incurred in order to accomplish those authorized projects. The statute is very direct in stating that those funds will not be used for operational expenses. In your packet, you, after that presentation, see a number of documents from other school districts, including resolutions, some project lists, and some examples of policies and resolutions establishing that oversight committee. So you'll see a number of different examples there from other school districts that we have acquired. I'll be happy to answer any questions we have on those issues.
Board members, do you have any questions? Mrs. Tosher?
Well, when, I was wondering what all project list categories was going to entail, but the one thing that I see here, if we go back to the very first slide where it says date, term of sales tax, project list categories, now I understand what that is, desire for an oversight committee, and that's on the back end. I see what we've left out here is we need to have some type of a community committee on the onset. Mm-hmm. And we also need to have a face, a respected face from the community for the campaign. In fact, it's somebody that when this person walks along, goes along, sings along with us the whole way, and they agree, and they have as much vested in this as we do, and they say, we need this. And I know that there are some people out there that have already said, I'll be glad to lead that charge, It's got to be somebody that the community has a high level of respect for, the person is believable, and when that person says, guys, we've got to have this money, the community is going to go, okay, let me vote for it. as far as the term, I think that, I heard you say that, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, whatever you want. I think that's a real slippery slope. And the reason I say that's a very slippery slope, I love the fact that the statute gives us such flexibility. However, the dangerous, I put it to an iced ski slope that is nothing but ice. There's no good powder foundation, it's nothing but ice, and you're just going to slide right down, and you know what happens when you slide right down, you run into a tree, you kill yourself or something like that. The reason for all of that being said is the fact that the expectation from the community is that we have complete transparency, that we show them exactly what we're going to use this tax for. Also, in what we're going to use this tax for, I think that definitely, instead of a desire for an oversight committee, I think that's a no-brainer that we need to have that oversight committee to ensure that it will not be the fox watching the hen house, but it will be individuals from the outside that will be overseeing this entrusted amount of money that has been given as a gift from the taxpayers. And I do look at this as the fact that this is, if we get this is a gift from the taxpayers. And so we owe it to them for them to have complete transparency and see everything. And I think if we're the only ones that are saying this is the way the money's spent, and it's spent here, and it was spent here, I think that we need some of those people from the community that believe in us, because I'm not real sure that we have that believability right now. I'm not sure that I'm just not sure that all the pieces are in place for us to be able to do all of this. And I said that, if my fellow board members want to do this, I certainly will support it, because I am hearing staff say that we absolutely have to have, we've talked about how much money is needed. But I've talked to Mr. Martin about this, and he says that we have to have a date on there. I think it's critical, the date that you use. I think the date that you have on the ballot is critical for many different reasons. And with that being said, I think I've said enough for the day. Said enough for right now anyway.
Is staff planning to make recommendations or give us various options on this so that we have something to react to?
Yeah, that really, all we've done is giving you the things to be thinking about as we're going through. They've got a presentation to share. Mr. Martin was the beginning of it with the law behind this, the things that must be part of the resolution. Now Amy and Mr. Tubb will go through with the information we've gathered, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I got you. Okay, good evening, board members, Dr. Graham. As Dr. Graham said, Keith opened it up for us to lay the foundation of what the statute says as far as the sales tax and what the can and cannot do's are. We want to start it out by recapping some information. We do have 2 board members that were not here, I believe, the last time we kind of laid out some of the options, so we're going to recap some information as well. We probably have some people out there watching in the audience, so it will be good to recap that information. Then give you some new information that hopefully will lead us to the conclusion of some of the questions that Dr. Graham posed earlier, or if not, we will be asking for, what additional information do we need to get in order to bring us to those conclusions. So we'll be going back and forth between the PowerPoint, and then we'll be relating some of the backup documentation that you have to the PowerPoint. So.
Good evening. The challenge we're looking at tonight is the current capital plan is balanced for the 5-year window. Capital plans over the last several years have been built based on what we could afford, and many items that are now desperately needed are not reflected in the plan. Those are unfunded capital needs.
You have, as part of your backup, and in the documentation as it stands, it is bookmarked approved FY15 5-year capital plan to the county. You will see we just wanted you to have a handy copy of what this capital plan looks like. And of course, as Mr. Tubb just mentioned, it is balanced in the 5-year window, but that is leaving a bunch of things out that we know we need. We have talked about the fact that the 3 schools that we are saying now we need within the next 5 years are not on this 5-year plan, as it is balanced. There are some other maintenance and technology needs that are not on this 5-year plan balanced. And I just want to bring to your attention that as the capital plan stands, when you look at the very first page of the capital plan, we have at the end of that 5 years about a $45.5 million reserve, which is about 8% of what the revenues are in the plan. We have tried to stay within the parameters of what the board has outlined in the past as our guidelines of the reserves that we want to keep. The guidelines that typically the state will give us and that our financial people will look at when they're looking at our ratings and things like that is somewhere between, at least between 7 and 10% for our capital plan. So the end of this 5-year plan takes us to 8%, so that is at the lower end of that qualification or that guideline that you have given us. And I just want to point that out because we, there is a little room for movement we have should the board decide that they want us to follow some different type of guideline. But even at the end of that, there's not much wiggle room there, and what we have here is what we have here based on the revenue projections that we have.
The unfunded capital needs we have are first the district technology initiatives, the necessary infrastructure that has to be built, student devices, and you've just voted recently on bring your own device and have your own device, so we have to make those available to people, and the replace refresh plan for new devices as they age and technology improves. The next area of unfunded capital needs is the maintenance and renovation initiatives. The necessary maintenance on older buildings, safety upgrades, and building upgrades. And as you all know, we've had a replacement and a normal plan of proceeding with this in the past, and now we've been forced to go from proactive to reactive in our maintenance. And the other unfunded capital need is classroom availability and the need for seats. No new schools are in the current plan that you see in the 5-year window. In fact, none are in the 10-year window. School growth continues at 1.5 to 2.3% per year, and many schools currently are at their capacity or very close to it.
So I'm going to take just a second to reference an additional handout that we have inside of your packet. When I go to, in the bookmarks entitled Capital Funding Crisis Update, this is the information that we have given out to many in the community. I think, Mr. Toiber and a couple of other board members took it to some legislative people as well, and kind of with Bob Sarah communicated this message as well. And we've taken this handout to several different members of the community to be able to really outline what the need is. But this document does, we think, a pretty graphic job of underlining what it is that has happened over the past several years and what has brought us to this point. We know that between 2009 and 2013, so in a 5-year period, the tax roll decreased by over 40%. And that funding loss to us equated to about $400 million over the same time period. In addition, there was a couple of other things that happened that created the perfect storm at that time, of course, of the economic downturn. Our impact fees declined from a high of $57 million in 2006 to just under $1.8 million that we received in 2014. The capital dollars that we had previously received from the state, anywhere between $8 and $21 million, virtually vanished during that time period. We did receive a small allocation from the state this year at about $1.5 million, but of course nowhere near what it had been in the past. and the 5-year impact of all those things was over $56 million. So that being said, when you combine that with all of the needs that Mr. Tubb just mentioned in terms of all of the maintenance needs, the things that we had in place that we had to then take away because we could no longer afford to maintain it, all of the technology initiatives that the state was adding while our funding was being decreased, and the student station needs during this whole period of time, we continued to grow by between 1.5% and 2.3% a year. There was only 1 year, which was in 2009, that we dipped in population, and the next year we gained all that back plus some. So our district has never stopped growing. We're one of the fastest growing districts in the state. And I'm sure that most of that is related to the fact that we rock in this district. I mean, we do a good job. People know it and they come. At the same time, it does create some unique challenges in terms of the budget and what we can do inside of our capital plan. So there were several things that we outlined in terms of what we wanted or what we thought we could do about this funding shortfall, which included some options that we're getting ready to go over in a minute. But when you look at these graphs that are here, it shows, the top two graphs shows what has happened to our revenue from way up here back in the day down to way down where it is right now, showing graphically what has happened with the revenue over the past 5 years. Here from 2008 all the way down to here in 2013, $656 million over the 5 years. And so this bottom graph shows our projected revenues on the blue line, what we believe we will be receiving between now and 2019, so over the next 5 years. And then the red line shows, in fact, what we believe we will need based on what we know in terms of what's coming for maintenance, for technology, and for our new student stations. And that gap, that space right there, equates to about $45 million a year. So that's the shortfall of funding that we're looking at to try to fill with some type of additional revenue over the next period of time.
Okay, to meet this challenge, we have variable options to generate capital revenue. First, we need to determine ways revenue needs can be met, how much of the revenue could be raised, and the pros and cons of our available options. The first option we have is additional property tax capacity. We need to ask the legislature to give us back the capacity for increasing property taxes to 2 mills, or at least higher than the current max of 1.5. Each quarter mill generates approximately $15.5 million based on the current tax roll. We must depend on the legislature to give us this capacity, and additional tax is paid entirely by local property tax owners.
Mr. Toiber, I believe at the last board meeting you spoke to this option and what had been happening at the, in Tallahassee at the legislative level related to this. Did you want to repeat for the audience today what your thought is about this particular option?
Yeah, it's we're fighting an uphill battle. There's 5 counties that actually have this predicament that need this capital outlay. Our lobbyists are working it very hard. We couldn't get anybody in our delegation to carry the water. So we couldn't get a bill sponsored to do that. I had one in the Senate, but we couldn't get one in the House. And it's a hot topic. We did get mild reception from our delegation that if we would find a finance bill, educational finance bill, and I could get a rider on it, or we can get it attached somehow, they would consider looking at supporting, the rider and supporting that particular bill. We did send the material over to Representative Rodriguez. He was open to it. So we're still trying to push that through, but it's not a very good bet. I wouldn't be putting a whole lot of eggs in that basket. So
yeah. So, but we thought it was important to mention that this was an option that we had fully vetted. It is something that we are still actively pursuing, that the board is still actively pursuing through trying to work with the legislature. But, as Mr. Toiber stated, we're not going to put our eggs in that basket because it looks like it's not a likely option this year.
The second option is general obligation bonds, commonly called GO bonds. This is another form of debt. It's a sale of bonds, a debt service of which would be paid back through revenue generated from an additional property tax levy. The revenue potential is substantial. It's dependent on the size of the bond. It must be agreed on by the voters in a referendum. And in this additional property tax, so again, the local taxpayers bear the brunt of this expense. The third option is COPS bonds, which we currently have used. Currently, the district has over $505 million in borrowing capacity based on using $1 million for debt service. This board has expressed its interest to stay away from more borrowing, and we currently use about 46% of property tax revenues for debt. You would have to direct us to use more of our capital funds for debt service if that's where you wanted to go. And more debt would increase this amount. And there are limitations on how this money could be used.
Okay. So I just want to reiterate something that Mr. Tubb said. We do currently have, based on our revenue that's coming in, based on our tax roll right now, and the $1.5 million funds that we have coming in, we do have the capacity to take on $505 million more in debt. We have $505 million in borrowing capacity, and that's based on a $1 million limit. So we do have that. The situation that could potentially put us in, as he said, we are using 46% of our revenue right now for debt service. So the more we take on, of course, the more that percentage creeps up, which limits us from doing other things that we had talked about previously, like our maintenance and our technology efforts. That will give us the new schools that we are looking for, but it will severely limit us in the other areas. And the revenues that we receive from COPS cannot be used in those other areas. It's got to be used on a footprintable type facility. So it's got to be a building that we're building, something to that effect. So it would not help us within our maintenance area.
Option number 4 is the restoration or the increase of the impact fees, which you know what the county board voted on today. The revenue before the reduction was $4 million. Authority is outside the board control. Other options could raise more money, and we have limitations on how these funds can be used, both how they're used and where they're used.
So as Mr. Tubb said, so the deal went down today, so we know what's going on. Of course, as we made this information that was put out to you, the meeting hadn't happened yet. It has happened this morning. So we know that the county commission voted on restoring our impact fees to 45%, and also based on the new rate that was in the impact fee study that we just received from Duncan and Associates. So what that means for us in terms of the additional revenue, based on the collections that are coming in now and what's been pulled, we should be looking at probably between $2.5 to $3 million in additional revenue starting next year. Of course, they're going to, so I'm saying a full year's worth of this increase would be around $2.5 million for us next year. And going over the next 5, looking at about between $2.5 and $3 million, assuming that the rate in which we're collecting will continue to go up a little bit in each of those subsequent years. So it is additional money that we'll have. We're thankful for that because as we've laid out, we need everything that we can get. But obviously that is not the solution that we are looking for, so we've got to continue to look for something else.
And option number 5 is sales tax. It has the potential of raising $50 million per year based on current sales tax collections. And if you'll look in your backup documents, there is a document in there showing uncollected funds that we could have generated, and that's where the $50 million came from. That was from the state's own reporting levels.
On your bookmark, it says possible tax revenues, and you will, if you go down that page, you will see Lee County towards the bottom of the page, and the column on the very right-hand side says district-wide unrealized tax revenues. Unrealized because we currently do not levy the half cent, and those unrealized for Lee County for this year would have been $51.7 million. This information comes from the Local Government Financial Information Handbook that I believe the Department of Revenue is the one that publishes this handbook each year.
And this revenue is raised by a broader population. We remind you that 23% of sales tax collections in the last year came from tourism. Additional money is not acquiring new debt, but it must be approved by a voter referendum. As we've told you before, 56 out of 67 counties have some sort of sales tax surtax benefiting various county, district, and government operations. 15 counties have a school district half-cent sales tax. 18 counties have a local government infrastructure tax that could be shared with school districts by agreement, and 23 counties have other sales surtaxes.
In your backup documentation, in the next book part, which is Florida County Sales Tax Levies, we have the list there of all of the counties and exactly what kind of surtax they are currently levying. So you will see the ones that where it says local government infrastructure surtax. Those are the ones that currently levy anywhere between a half-cent and 1 cent, depending on what their county is, and it'll tell you what that percentage is. And then as you come on down towards the bottom of the list, you will see those counties that currently have a school capital outlay surtax, 15 of them, as Mr. Tubb mentioned. So they're all listed here, and then in a list, and then the following page shows this same information in a graphical format to show which counties levy which tax and what percentage that is. Okay. So all of the counties that currently levy anything are listed within that documentation.
Now we get to timelines. There are countywide elections already planned by the county, which are free to us to participate in. These are in March 1st of 2016, which is open for debate. The legislature is talking about changing that. It's a presidential primary campaign, and that may move to March 15th to be, I guess it's Super Tuesday, be more in line with the rest of the nation for that primary. August 30th, 2016 is the primary election for the next cycle. And November the 8th, 2016 is the general election for that next cycle.
Now, there's some pros and some cons to these. The pros related to each one of these dates is that they are already countywide elections, so they are free for us to participate in. They're already set, they're already countywide, so that is one definite plus. One con to them is the fact that they're all in 2016. So as you heard Mr. Martin say earlier, once you have the election, and if we are successful in that, then you have to give the notification to the Department of Revenue, and the tax will be effective starting January 1st in the year after that. So with these dates, what that means is that there will be no tax to be levied until 2017. So we're looking at, 2 years from now before we see any revenue on these dates. And that is one thing that is a definite consideration with these dates.
Further in timelines, there are election dates which we would have to pay for. Pay for the cost of the administration to participate in special election or any non-countywide elections. The ones coming up are September 15th, 2015, November 3rd, 2015, or any other date by special election. And I'll remind you that the letter we had from Sharon Harrington, the cost is about $3 a voter to do that, to do a full election. We do believe we would get a small discount. We would get a discount if we piggyback on the citywide elections, because those are currently would be being held, and we wouldn't have to repay for those polling places. The cost for a full one is about $1.2 million, but I'll remind you that paying $1.2 million could generate $50 million in revenue by doing it in 2015 rather than doing it in 2016.
Would you say that again? I didn't hear you.
If we elect to go in 2015 and we pay up to $1.2 million for the election and we win, then we will generate an additional $50 million in revenues in 2016, which we would not have generated had we waited until 2016 to run the election.
Okay.
So that's a $49 million loss.
So in that so in that statement, Mr. Tubb kind of outlined the pro and the con. The pro is that we would be given one of these dates and being successful, we would be successful earlier, so we would start getting our revenue 1 year earlier than any of the other dates, which means $50 million to us. One of the cons to that is because these are not, either it's a special election, so there's no election going on at that time, or in September and November, there's citywide elections, so we would have to pay to put on the rest of the election for the rest of the county. There is some cost associated with that. If I can, I'm going to take you again to your handouts, and if you have...
Up right there for just a minute.
Absolutely.
When you said that there are additional costs because there will be areas of the county that do not have polling places. However, I spoke with Mr. Martin today, and we have polling places all over the county. We have 100 and something of them. And so you're not going to have to pay any fee for the location because we can open up our schools, because this is a benefit to the school children all around the county. So I think that's a wash there. And I'm not sure that, I know the other cost would be the poll workers. That's an additional cost. And I'm not sure that we could use, and I'm just going to put this out there, retired educators. And I do know that there are some that already exist that are poll workers, and I'd be willing to bet you there's a great number of them that realize the state of affairs in the county, in the school district, and they would be willing to do that as a service and wouldn't charge the supervisor of election for their day, because it's a minimal amount that they get paid. And I think that would help us in having the face of these individuals there at the polls and at our schools. And I'm just throwing that out there.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. We have in your handouts, we have bookmarked as election dates, and we just have the actual information from the supervisor of elections that actually lists the dates that we just outlined for you, so just so you see the source that we received that from. And then we have another handout in there entitled Sales Tax Timelines on your bookmark. And basically what that is laying out each of the different election dates and what we would have to do and when we would have to do it, and the estimated cost of that in order to make all that happen at the time. So you'll see that for each of these dates, the staff and community background work that we talked about earlier, that starts now. We're going to be in the process of that now, regardless of whatever date that we pick, because we need to make sure that we have our groundwork laid. We have the approximate date that you would have to do the board resolution for each of those. It says within 120 days. The date I noted is approximate because we basically went back 4 months from the elections. On or around that date, we're going to have to make sure that we do that. And then the estimated cost associated with each of the dates. We have an estimated cost of either the September 15th or the November 3rd election at about $800,000. That is because, based on the information that the supervisor of elections has given us, that Mr. Tubb had just talked about, they gave us the number of $3 to $5 per voter. So assuming that, because we're already having an election in the city of Fort Myers and city of Cape Coral, we took the remaining voters and basically said, okay, $3 per voter would give us about $800,000. Now, given, Ms. Dozier, what you were just talking about, that number could change, but based on the information that they gave us, that's what we're thinking could be the worst case scenario. So we lay that out for you, as a point of reference in thinking about these timelines and what has to happen when, just as a framework for that.
There is also an option that we could do a mail-in ballot, where we mail, the supervisor of election mails out a ballot to all the registered voters. They vote, send it back in like an absentee ballot, and we conduct our referendum in that manner, that could be at any time. there would be no polling places involved in that. The supervisor of elections did tell us,
Clearly, someone doesn't like that idea.
Right, he did not like that idea.
Does somebody need to go out?
the supervisor of elections did tell us that we could count on a much higher turnout by doing it by mail ballot, that the interest would be there. The mechanism for doing that is they have to first mail out a notice to every voter that there's going to be a mail-out ballot. They have to explain to them that the mail-out ballots can only go to their registered address. And if they're not going to be at that address, or if they're going to be traveling and they can't get it at that address, then they have to apply for an absentee ballot, because absentee ballots can be mailed anywhere, but these ballots can only be mailed within the county. And then there's the cost of setting up the postage going out, the mail going out for 2 to 3 pieces, the mail coming back in, her staff to collect that mail, open it, scan it, count it, all of that. So there would be, her estimate was that you would not generate a huge savings by doing that, that it would probably be in the 1.2 million range, just like a voter. The advantages or the disadvantage, and we don't know what that might be exactly, is the high turnout might help or might hurt. I'm not sure which way that might go. That's for you to decide.
So let me just point out a couple of other pieces of information that we have within your handouts, and briefly discuss them. Under the bookmark election costs, I have the actual letter that we received from the supervisor of election that talked about the process that they would be looking for us to do and how they estimated the cost and what types of services would be included in those costs for the election. And that's where, we got the numbers where we referenced how much, special elections or non-countywide elections would cost. We also have under our estimated sales tax annual project expenses bookmark, we have a spreadsheet there that shows a breakdown in 5 years, just a sample breakdown of the project categories that Dr. Graham had referred to earlier, and the types of revenue that could possibly be pointed towards each of those categories. Currently, we have 4 categories on the list: technology, school improvements, which is about some of the maintenance items that we had discussed, security infrastructure, so that includes that equipment that would need to be in place at all of our schools for security, that of course would meet the requirements that Keith laid out earlier in terms of having at least a 5-year useful life in our new or renovated schools. So you will see that the dollar amounts attached to each one of those categories right now come back to the $45 million per year that we had talked about as far as what our shortfall is that we're looking at. So those are the categories that have been referenced, and we would be looking for some feedback as far as other categories, if any, that we need to make sure to include within here. Once we have our categories, then we're going to break down and create that specific project list that would need to be included within the resolution itself. And then we have information, sales tax info from other counties. We polled, I'm sorry, was there a question?
I just wanted to insert on those categories that came from the very beginnings of the list that I know Mr. Snell's been working on, and as we looked at projects we know are going to need to come from this, we plugged them in, and those are the categories that evolved from that. So that's where those came from, based on projects we already know we would want to include on the list.
Okay. And then we have in there some information on sales tax information from other counties. We polled some other counties about their sales tax efforts and what they had to do, and we asked them very pointed questions about when they had their election, how long was their term for their sales tax term, how long was that for, what type of election it was it a general election, a special election, why did they pick that date, what was the cost of their election, what kinds of things did they learn from their effort in trying to pass their sales tax, what kind of help did they get, what consultants, if any, did they use, all those types of things that would help us get a feel for what did other counties do and what are we going to have, what challenges are we going to face, and how did other counties face them, so that we could kind of begin our formulation of a plan. So that's just some information there for your information. We're going to use this as we delve a little bit further into our plan once we find out from the board where you are in terms of those 4 questions that Dr. Graham had asked earlier. And then, as Keith mentioned earlier, we have some sample resolutions and project lists from other counties and their resolutions that their board had passed, just as a reference for you. So as we begin to get to that point, we know, we have some examples, and then we can fashion around some of these, or kind of take bits and pieces from each, or create our own, depending on what is the desire of the board. So that being said, we take you back then to the 4 questions that Dr. Graham had said that we needed to know at the beginning of the presentation to find out what is the desire of the board in each of these categories. And if we, at this point, do not have the information for you to be able to answer those questions, we want to know, what is the additional information that we need to gather so that we can do that and get us to the point where you feel like you have the information to answer the questions.
Okay, thank you. Shall we start with when?
Well, and I'll go ahead and begin. I think the time is now. After today, we realize that we're not going to get the 100% of the impact fees, and I think that when you look at how long a campaign takes, you have to look at, I think I counted that it would be about 8 months until November if we decided November 2015. And then September, obviously, a couple of months less. This is not, when you talk about the campaign, you're talking about all the backup work that goes along with it.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and if you notice, this letter here from Sharon Harrington was dated March 27th, 2013.
Yeah, correct.
So, folks,
She is preparing a new letter for us. Just
well, what I'm saying is, that letter came to the school district of Lee County, and this isn't our first rodeo. We have been on this horse for a long time, and it's time for us to pony up and make a final decision what we're going to do. And I think after sitting today, I certainly don't want to be the voice of the campaign. I don't want to be the face of the campaign, because I think that there are people that are much better suited for that than I am. But I think the time is for us to stand up for children now. And I would be certainly supportive of putting something on the ballot as early as September if we could get it together. That would be my druthers, I think. And then at the latest, November, if we couldn't get it done by September. The next question that you're asking.
Just go through and see if we all agree on the time.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Fine.
Mary?
Fine with me.
Yes, I think the time is now, and the sooner the better. I think that if we wait till November, we have that additional 2 months for campaigning. And I think the campaign and the education of the community is important.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Teuber?
I think November's a good date as well.
Ms. Riviere?
I'm fine with September or November.
As am I. So now we're looking at,
If you had asked for a recommendation, we would have offered November, just because of the staff time that Ms. Dozier mentioned we're going to need. And this is a this is a campaign to educate, is what it is.
Mrs. Dozier?
Well, a campaign is a campaign is a campaign is a campaign. When you go out and you campaign, what you're doing is you are exposing the public to an idea or a person. Usually, a campaign time, the thrust of the campaign, or the majority of the campaign, is 3 months prior to the actual date that it's going to be on the ballot. So, staff has been knowing about this. We should already have PowerPoint presentations put together. This could serve as part of a PowerPoint we should already know different groups of the community that we need to go out and not necessarily educate, but share with them the information that we have and the need. And one big aha for, I think, some of the parents in this community, as well as the business community, is the fact that we are becoming, and I don't want to use the word negligent, but it's real close to negligent in the maintenance and taking care of our buildings. And I will remind this board that years ago, we went down that road where we neglected the maintenance of our buildings. And due to that, the Commissioner of Education almost came down here and did not allow Lee County to open that year. I have sat here at the dais and I have said repeatedly, that's not another road that I want to go down, because we have an obligation to have safe, secure, good functioning buildings for our children. Now, the fact that we don't have the money is another thing. So again, I'm saying on the campaign trail, we all have been on the campaign trail, and we know how long it takes to get that message out there. It doesn't take 9 months, because when you say 9 months to a year to get it on the ballot, that's collecting the information. We've already collected the data, folks. We got another piece of data today. And, you know, I can go along with November, but I think every month that we wait, I can do September, November, but I just think that we need to go ahead and get our message out there and get something done about it.
Okay, well, let's just proceed with, we know it's going to be 2015. And let's go through some of the other questions and see what the answers are, and then see if that helps us come back to answering the first one. Term of the sales tax. Thoughts? Mr. Toiber?
Well, I believe the term of the sale, I'll start out. First off, I believe right now as we're poised, it's not going to pass. There is a overwhelming bias against passing the sales tax. We heard it today. I hear it everywhere I go. I believe it can be overcome, but I think a lot of things are necessary. Number one, I think the transparency, and we all know that. But as far as the term and the project list, one of the biggest issues, even if we were completely transparent, and even if we did everything and we had complete utmost confidence in our district, which we don't, but we can get there. I believe that's just an educational part. It's the natural bias of the voting public across the country, but it's more even prevalent here in Lee County. They just don't trust us. And I don't mean us as far as educational system or Lee County school system. As politicians, they see it time and time again. You know, look at the lottery. Lottery is supposed to help education. Oh, squirrel. It's not. And so, you know, they see that time and time again, and they see it at the state level. You promise you're going to spend it for one thing, and you don't. So I think our term becomes very, very important in the sense that if we do it a 2-year or a 3-year or a 4-year period with a renewal, give us 2 years, and if we don't do what we said we'd do, you pull it away, so that they say, okay, we're going to give you a little bit of rope. In other words, all we really need, because if we're going to have an oversight committee, we know and we have confidence in ourselves, give us a little bit of rope, let us prove ourselves. So I think that's going to go a long way. So the term has to be that. And the project list, I think, has to be very well enunciated to be, what are we going to try to do? And I think if we show that we talked about a 45 million, did you go over the projected numbers? Mm-hmm. As far as, the projection, as far as, I didn't hear the part of we're going to say, look, are we going to, I saw what the numbers are, but if we looked at you guys give us a recommendation as how much we want to put towards retiring debt and how much we want to put to new construction?
Well,
we didn't have that discussion, do we?
Well, yeah, that was the category list that we looked at. So the estimated sales tax annual project expenses here. Right now, we have 4 categories. You mentioned retirement of debt, which currently right now is not a category. So if we want to add that category in, we'd add that category and then, assign a number to it. So we would come to a conclusion on which categories we want, the dollar amount associated with each, and then we would drill down into the project list for that. Currently, right now, these are the 4 categories.
Because I don't believe that the public will go for school improvements, adding technology, security infrastructure. I don't believe they're going to pay for that. That's what we do. I think they're going to pay for new brick and mortar, and they're going to pay to retire debt. Because they're looking at, what do you need, where's the gap we have to bridge for that sales tax? And I don't think we have to go if we go all retiring debt, you're going to have people like, wait a minute, it's okay carrying some debt because it's a 50-year building. There has to be some amortization, so we can't put it all to retiring debt. But we have 46% of our property tax with our debt. $46 million debt service a year. We need to make some of it to the people to reach the people in our community that believe that fiscal responsibility. We have to have a manageable debt load. So I think there has to be a portion of that, and then the other have to be is just how much we need. We got kids coming. We got to build seats. And I think if we keep it real simple, just for seats, and to cut this much amount of debt. Real simple, real clear. If we start talking about technology and security, then all of a sudden it becomes more smoke and mirrors, and people go, oh, you're going to do this, you're going to buy this, we're funding the state's unfunded mandate. I mean, you can think of, for every argument you can think of, there's 15 of them out there that people are going to say why they're not going to approve it. And and I'm not saying we don't need this stuff, but like, for example, technology. The biggest thing I hear is, well, the state is the one mandating it for you, let them pay for it. Well, they're not. So I mean, we can have the arguments. We know why we need it, but it's not gonna carry the day. There's too many reasons for them to say no. So that's my point. I want it simple.
Ms. LaRiviere?
Just a question about the categories. For the technology, were you looking more at thinking of that more as infrastructure or actual purchasing of technology tools?
Both.
Okay. So if we were to do that in a category, it would be nice to see a breakdown for the infrastructure because we do have to keep up with the demands of the infrastructure as time goes on.
Right. We would have to be careful in that area because, as Keith mentioned, you're talking about, like a 5-year useful life.
Right.
So there's certain devices that just wouldn't meet that requirement, but it would be a combination of both. So I hear you in terms of that breakdown.
And then another question with regard to school improvements. Actually, what we're looking at is not improving them so they are more wonderful looking. We're looking at school improvements so that we're able to still continue the use of those buildings and they're in good, solid condition.
Yes, ma'am. It's more about the harder core maintenance in the buildings, roofing and HVAC, for example.
And those parts are important because they keep us from having to build another building if building goes in disrepair.
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Dozier?
Mr. Martin, this question is for you. Okay, we put together a resolution defining what the project is going to be. And let's say we go out for 3 years or 5 years. When we have to come back again to the voters, because we have written it like that, does that prohibit us in the future from including, and I'm thinking about what Mr. Toiber said, the fact that the lack of transparency, there is some doubt out there, and the fact that there's a lack of trust there from the officials not being good stewards of all the money that they've been entrusted with. Could we, at 5 years down the road, change the description or the project cost? Aren't we allowed to do that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Would they have to go back for a vote?
Yeah.
You would adopt a term as part of the resolution. That's what would go before the voters. And the project that you define with the project list that's attached to the resolution are the projects to be addressed in that term that you present to the voters.
If I might, the counties that we have talked to have said that what you put in your referendum, the project list, you have some flexibility that you could move one school up or one school down, but you're limited to those schools. So it would be in your next referendum that you get to put out a new list.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so that's true. That would make more sense with regards to the school improvements. We would identify the schools that we're targeting for each of those pieces. That gives a lot more buy-in.
Okay, well, let's move on to the Oversight Committee. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fisher.
My vote, I think the question was the length, the term of the sales tax. And I would say 5 years with a renewal.
Like,
And I would support 5 years, too.
5 years is good.
The Oversight Committee. Mrs. Doge, you already started to address that.
I think that we are going to have to enlist the support of a community group on the forefront. In fact, we already know some very key players that should be on this oversight committee. I think.
Wait, you're talking about
No,
front?
I'm talking about on the front end.
Oh, telling them who the.
Helping us to educate the community. We already know some people that are very supportive of this idea. In fact, today when I was walking out of the county commission meeting, a lady stopped and said, I want to help y'all do this. The executive director of the BIA. So there are people out there that have already indicated that they want to be on something, campaign committee to help us. So that's one of the absolutes that we have to do on the forefront. And, we can say that, it'll be a committee of, 20 people, whatever, 30 people, how many, appointments we each have, that can all be determined. But I think that would be something on the front end that helps us on the back end when it goes to the ballot.
Are you saying the Oversight Committee is the same one that is the campaign?
No,
Okay.
no,
I just
no.
wanted to make sure.
No, in fact, I see the Oversight Committee with people that, at the end, there are people that have knowledge in forensics, people that have, knowledge with,
Yep.
their CPAs, accountants, those types of people, because they need to be making sure that we are doing exactly what we said we're going to do.
And they need to be there not just at the end, but all the way along. They need
No,
to-
no,
I
no,
don't think
no.
so.
The Oversight Committee needs to be there at the end. The oversight that they look to, see, we're going to have a plan, and we
Right.
tell them, this is our project. This Oversight Committee, they're at the end, because they're going to make sure that we take the dollars and we spend them
Okay.
according to the project cost.
So there's
But
nobody to check.
auditors, right, that's the type of people that you need on this committee. You need auditors, CPAs, accountants, forensics people that can look down and find out and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's how we have credibility. Do we need to go ahead and identify that group? Possibly. Mr. Martin would have to tell us that. However, I think that this other group, it's basically, it's your campaign committee.
Exactly. It's your team.
For lack of a better word, that's the name of our committee. And the face is your campaign chairman. Whoever your campaign chairman is, that's going to be the face of the committee. In some communities, it's been the chairman of the board, it's been a board member, it's been a community member, it's been all sorts of different people. Pardon me?
Can we do that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, up in Sarasota County, the same woman on the board has done it for 2 different terms.
Okay. So let's just answer the 4 questions and then go back to the campaign. When is 2015, the term of the sales tax is 5 years or less. Project list, we're adding a category for debt retirement.
Okay.
And then we may shrink these, but this is I'm trying to embrace everything that everybody's brought forward. And we want an oversight committee.
Yes.
As part of our plan. So is that answers the 4 questions.
Okay, if I can just ask a clarified question for the project list categories, we're just adding the debt retirement, we're not taking anything away at this point?
This time.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Ms. Morgan, based on the strength of the conversation, my assumption is that you would want the Oversight Committee in the sales tax resolution, so it's
Correct.
a condition of what's presented
Correct.
to the voters.
So
Yes.
people know up front that
Yes.
that's going to happen.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, now let's go back to,
We need the exact date. We'll need the exact date, which of those 2 dates, and you said 2015. We'll need to know.
well,
I think the majority of the group went with November.
but I think, again, we have a little bit of time when we give you these directions, you could certainly come back to us in the next 30 days and say you would prefer one over the other. I don't think we're,
Well, you've got to have 120 days prior, and what is that? Have
I
you
would-
figured that date out?
For September, I believe for September, if I looked at the documents, it
It
would
is
be
May 15 is what was provided in the
May 15th.
timeline, but one other thing to keep in mind
So we don't choose the date.
is that you also have a time frame to get the matter to the Board of County Commissioners for them to take action. I would guess that we probably need to at least another 30 days for that purpose.
Let's go with November.
And in the end, the county commissioners are going to decide what date it will be. Correct? If I understand correctly? They will decide if and when?
We will make-
That's an issue we'll confront when the matter is presented to the
Okay,
Board of
I'm
County
sorry.
Commissioners.
Okay. So, back to the front end.
Campaign committee.
Campaign committee.
Right. Where did Mr. Toiber go?
I don't know. I think he's got some emergency issues going on
yeah,
right
with
now.
with his car, so
Oh,
I
forgot
think
all
the
about
bottom fell out of his car.
it. No.
Transmission pillar.
I think that is the whole bottom falls
Oh,
out.
the whole
when
bottom part.
transmission
Oh, no.
falls out.
So,
have the date, if, I just want to
Yep.
review what I think we've heard, and Mr. Martin, you correct me if I've heard differently. November, date, the, Amy, would you go back to that slide, please?
yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
yes.
The term, 5 years. The project list categories, we've added debt retirement, and obviously, those are just categories. Now, we're going to have to give you a very specific list of what falls in each of those.
Right.
And in the referendum language, it will be included, there will be an oversight committee to determine, to basically, as you all said, audit or monitor that we are spending the money as we said we would.
In the resolution language, yes.
In the resolution.
Correct,
Thank
yes.
Right.
Okay.
you. Okay.
And I think we all should be thinking of people that, I think a committee of 25 would be a good number. I think that was the committee that we had before. And I think for all of us to come up with like 2 or 3 members per person, and then the superintendent puts members on the committee.
Yeah, I think we should be recommending members for both committees, both the Oversight Committee and the Campaign Committee. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have an idea about the Oversight Committee. I think the Oversight Committee, we let people apply.
Oh,
What better way to get
Huh?
them to give us a resume, what makes them qualified, and they understand what they have to do? What makes it better than for us not to handpick them? The campaign, yeah, because we've got to get them getting our message out there. But for the oversight, we need to have people that say, I want to do this because I want the community to trust you. And I've got 25 years in the forensic sciences and blah, 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 you know.
well, but I do think we have to set minimum criteria.
Could just be a big.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What,
Yes, Mrs. Fisher.
Okay, excuse me. I did look at some of the different counties that have oversight committees, and I noted that it is a committee of volunteers, so I think the application process is a great idea, and they will be exactly that, the oversight and the monitoring ones. What I noticed also was that they have representatives from different parts of the community, you know, finance, education, city governments, black community, Hispanic community, and business representatives. So that's another thing. I think that we should establish that criteria,
We could do that.
you know, before we just call it oversight committee.
And I think
Yeah.
we can do that at another meeting.
Yeah.
A- And as you think about that, Mr. Martin and I were just commiserating over here, it could be that you take the basic structure of advisory. This would be bigger, obviously, but you could, as far as how you appoint and that sort of thing, and you could also take members of current advisories to include on those, so your finance advisory was represented in your construction advisory with the expertise you're talking about. And I know I just heard you're not going to decide that tonight, obviously, but as we move forward.
Well, I think we probably should schedule a conversation, perhaps, well, let's see, March 17th is our next meeting. Probably the first meeting in April, we should set aside at least 30 minutes to follow up on this conversation. have staff come back with filling in some of the blanks, asking the questions that need to be asked. And then we should probably, going forward at every meeting, set
A portion
aside
of the- yeah.
30 minutes at least to revisit any issues or questions.
And get updates.
And get updates, yeah.
We've been working on talking points and the things Ms. Dozier was mentioning, so we'll, maybe for that April meeting, we'll have those prepared for you as well to review to be sure they have what you want in them.
Okay.
I'm
Other
sorry, could you
bo-
repeat that? Dr.
Other
Graham?
board member comments or staff comments?
Yeah, we'll just go through the next steps. I think we took care of some of these. You all talked about the date selection and community involvement. You got quite in. Based on what you've just talked about, we'll talk amongst ourselves with Dr. Graham and the crew about staff responsibilities and, who's assigned to what, and probably come back to you with that at the next meeting that you had requested. And then I think at that point, we'll have to shore up the exact dates of when we'll be talking about doing, when you all will adopt your board resolution, and the notification then goes to the Board of County Commission and the supervisor after that. So I suppose that all those things take place starting with the next meeting.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
All right.
Fine, too.
Any other comments? Questions?
I
No.
just want to say thank you for a very clear and comprehensive presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan, just one
Yes.
reminder, if I may. You'll recall that the end of January that I sent out a memo concerning the statute that provides limitations concerning advocating the passage of the sales tax referendum. And just in terms of establishing a campaign committee, would just remind you to keep in mind the limitations established by that statute, which limits a local government or a person acting on behalf of that local government from expending public funds to advocate the passage of a matter on a referendum. So certainly the school board could establish a campaign committee. We just need to understand that in that capacity, those individuals would be acting on behalf of the board, and so they would have similar limitations with respect to how they could communicate a message with respect to the referendum.
Okay, thank you. Good advice. That's something we all need to think about before we have this conversation next time, and perhaps spend a little bit more time with you fleshing it out. That would be great. Okay. Any other?
No,
No?
thank you. We appreciate your feedback. It was very helpful, and we'll continue with, what you've laid out.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for making progress. Mr. Martin, do you have any comments?
None, thank you.
Oh, I should go to board member discussion. Is there anything that the board would like to discuss? I see Mrs. LaRiviere with her hand up.
I do. Just a real question. I was curious where we are in the RFP process for our financial advisor.
Yep, absolutely. We just had what we believe is our final meeting in terms of getting the draft of the RFP together. I emailed the superintendent just earlier today, right before this workshop, and said, we have to kind of pretty up the draft. I'm going to send the draft to her this evening so that we can discuss, make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what's in the RFP, and then as soon as we have that agreement, then we'll put it out on the street. So we hope to have that out on the street within the next week.
Great.
And what's the deadline?
The deadline for
Responses? Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't remember all of the deadlines off the top of my head, but we were hoping to be able to have it back to the board table for approval of the recommendation within, I believe, 6 to 8 weeks.
I'm just thinking in terms of this referendum. It would be nice to.
Right. And so I understand what you're saying. We'll go back and look at the timeline and try our best. I think the thing that we came across, is there one board meeting in April?
There are two. Aren't
Two?
there?
Okay, there's maybe one in March.
One in
then.
March.
One in March.
Okay, Okay, so let me go back and look at the timeline. I don't want to misspeak, but in the information that I sent to the superintendent, I'll make sure to point out what we had discussed as the timeline, and then see if there's any concern related to that where we might have some opportunity to shave some, if there's a concern.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Fisher, do you have anything you'd like to discuss?
No, I just want to thank everyone for their support, and I hope to see you guys on Thursday. Thank you.
Great. See you then. And did you have more to say? No? Mrs. Dozier? No? Mr. Martin?
No, thank you.
And Dr. Graham?
We appreciate the information you shared and the direction so we can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this meeting is adjourned.